Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to delve into an intriguing and foundational concept in American political science, the cake layer theory of federalism. This metaphor vividly illustrates how powers and responsibilities are divided between the national, state, and local governments in the United States. Let's start at the very beginning. When the United States was founded, the framers of the Constitution had a profound challenge. They needed a governmental system strong enough to unify diverse states, yet flexible enough to respect their autonomy. This balancing act birthed federalism, a unique structure where power is shared and divided between national and state governments. The first form of federalism that took hold was dual federalism, often depicted metaphorically as a layer cake. Picture, if you will, a cake with clearly defined layers, each separate and distinct. This is exactly how dual federalism operated from the late 18th century until roughly the 1930s. The national government had clear responsibilities, such as national defense, international diplomacy, and currency regulation. Meanwhile, states had their clearly defined sphere, managing education, law enforcement, and public health policies. These layers didn't mingle much. Each maintained its autonomy, clearly delineating boundaries and responsibilities. However, history often shakes things up. The Great Depression of the 1930s severely tested the capacities of state governments. Under President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal policies, a new model emerged known as cooperative federalism, represented by the marble cake. Unlike its layered predecessor, marble cake federalism illustrates how the powers of national and state governments became intertwined and cooperative. No longer were responsibilities neatly separated. Instead, national and state governments began to collaborate closely, addressing shared problems such as unemployment, infrastructure, and economic recovery. The creation of programs like Social Security, unemployment insurance, and large-scale public works exemplified this blended approach. By the 1960s, under the influence of Presidents Kennedy and Johnson, we entered another era, creative or centralized federalism. This model strengthened the federal government's role even further, often funneling resources directly to local governments, sometimes bypassing state intermediaries altogether. Landmark legislative achievements like the Civil Rights Act, Medicare, and Medicaid dramatically expanded federal involvement, leveraging federal dollars to enact sweeping social changes and enforce civil rights. However, political tides eventually shifted again, and by the 1970s through the 2000s, new federalism emerged. This era emphasized decentralization, seeking to restore greater power and autonomy back to the states. Presidents like Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton championed this approach, particularly through mechanisms known as block grants. So, what exactly are these block grants? Essentially, they are large sums of federal money provided to states with broad objectives but relatively few specific conditions attached. Instead of rigidly dictating exactly how funds must be spent, block grants give states flexibility, enabling them to tailor spending according to local needs and priorities. For example, a state receiving a community development block grant might decide to fund affordable housing in one community, improve roads in another, or support small business growth in yet another. This flexibility represents the core advantage of block grants. States can address their unique challenges more efficiently and responsively. Of course, this flexibility does have its critics. Some worry that without strict federal guidelines, funds may be diverted from intended purposes or spent unevenly across states, potentially exacerbating disparities. Today, we operate within a complex framework often described as contemporary federalism. This framework continuously oscillates between greater federal control and enhanced state autonomy, varying with political leadership and specific policy challenges. A recent example is the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, which involved a blend of federal mandates and state-level implementation choices, vividly illustrating the intertwined nature of contemporary governance. Let's now look at how federalism and block grants work. Federal block grants are an important funding mechanism by which the federal government provides resources to state and local governments, but with greater autonomy and fewer restrictions compared to other types of grants. Let's explore this through a practical narrative. Imagine a mid-sized American city, Riverdale. The federal government has recently issued a Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, a classic example of a federal block grant. The goal of this funding is broadly defined to enhance community development, but exactly how this will happen is largely left to the discretion of the city's leaders. Because federal block grants like the CDBG allow cities considerable latitude, Riverdale quickly allocates the resources to projects that local residents have specifically identified as critical. The city does not have to spend months ensuring strict adherence to detailed federal guidelines or exhaustive compliance checks typical of categorical grants. This means that Riverdale can respond swiftly and efficiently to community needs. However, this flexibility has potential drawbacks. Because Riverdale's leadership prioritizes affordable housing and infrastructure, another city, Lakeside, receiving the same block grant, may prioritize entirely different areas, such as expanding parks or funding community art programs. Consequently, critics argue that block grants may lead to uneven policy outcomes across different regions. While one community benefits significantly in infrastructure and housing, another may focus on less critical or lower impact projects, potentially diluting the intended national objectives. Moreover, some observers express concern that states or local governments might redirect block grant funds away from nationally critical priorities, possibly due to political influence or shifting local preferences, thereby undermining broader federal goals. Despite these criticisms, proponents emphasize the primary benefits of federal block grants. They argue that states and local governments possess superior knowledge about the needs and priorities of their communities. Thus, allowing local authorities greater autonomy through block grants can lead to more effective use of federal funds, more responsive policies, and ultimately more satisfied communities. In summary, federal block grants, such as the Community Development Block Grant, embody a balance between federal support and local autonomy. By providing broadly defined funding streams with fewer restrictions, they allow state and local governments to tailor spending decisions to the specific needs and priorities of their communities, though the trade-off is the potential for inconsistent outcomes nationwide. Riverdale's mayor and city council convene a meeting with community leaders, business owners, and residents. Because block grants come with general guidelines rather than rigid mandates, the city has substantial flexibility to decide where to direct the funds. After discussing various pressing needs, such as revitalizing aging infrastructure, providing affordable housing, and improving healthcare services, the city prioritizes affordable housing projects and the renovation of local roads and sidewalks, recognizing these as crucial for enhancing both quality of life and local economic vitality.